All right, everybody. Well, we've got a group here that's nice and intimate, so I'd encourage you to come on closer in if you want, and we'll get going here. So my name's Anne. I'm founder and CEO of Canopy Studios, and I'm looking forward to present to you today on auditing the health of your website, really checking under the hood. This was originally labeled as a Drupal session, but it's really applicable for Drupal or WordPress. I didn't put WordPress things in here, but I know, and we can talk about that after. Okay, awesome, great. Well, thank you everybody for the round of introductions. It's really helpful to get a sense of who's in the room and kind of what challenges you're facing. It sounds like we have a couple of people that are just about to go into a redesign, other people that have a current site that they want to make sure that it's running in optimal health, and a couple of friendly vendors in the room that are looking to kind of learn more from each other. So, cool, without further ado, my name again is Anne Stefanik, founder and CEO of Canopy Studios. I really help to make websites easy to understand, and at Canopy Studios, we have two parts to our business. We have our full service professional service, which does all website redesigns, development, but we also have something that's fairly unique, is a full service support department. So over half of our employees and half of our clients actually come and fall in our continuous improvement or support department. And every single one of those goes through a site audit as part of their onboarding. So whether we're looking at a site audit in the sense of looking at from the perspective of a rebuild, or if we're looking at it from the perspective of onboarding the current code base and helping it last, both of these are good or avenues that we use the site audit. You can find me at Ann_Canopy on Twitter and our website canopy.com. Okay, so why do you want to audit your site? So first off, do these problems sound familiar? So first off, your page speed. Does it take more than 3 seconds to load? Maybe your site doesn't work well on mobile devices. A lot of times you'll notice that the mobile experience was an afterthought. It wasn't part of the original experience, so there might not be a lot of content strategy on where things are placed. You might also have a site that's difficult to update. We have lots of clients that come to me and they say, oh, I hate WordPress or I hate Drupal. And it's because they're actually been served up a really awkward, uncomfortable content editing experience, because both platforms are really powerful. But if it's really hard and frustrating, that's something to be mindful of. Maybe you also have users that can't find what they need on the site, or you're even getting negative feedback from customers, stakeholders, donors, staff. Perhaps you even have a site that keeps crashing. Regression bugs are really a real thing if you don't have a full test coverage on your code base. So looking at ways that when you do push code or you do push a new feature, does your site break? Is it really brittle? That dovetails on if adding features to your site is difficult, cumbersome, maybe even impossible. Another common thing we see is that sites aren't loading over HTTPS, which is just making sure your site runs over a secure connection. And or the worst one is you get hacked. We sometimes, clients don't even know they've been hacked when we do their code audit. So it's kind of looking at, like, even if your site only has one of those issues, is it important to address? And the question answer is yes. Any website that is not optimally working can dramatically affect your organization's bottom line. So even if it's just one of these things, it's a really good practice to go through and inventory your entire site. And so when we look on a site, is the site going to be a working site? It doesn't just have to look good, it actually has to work. So when we look at a poorly designed website, it can obviously damage your credibility. It can make you seem out of touch. And it can cost you customers, donors, visitors, however you want to personify your audience base. So what we try to do is when we adopt any new site into our support team, or we're doing a net new build, is that we're looking at a website audit. And when we're looking at the overall health of a website, we consider there's two main components. There is your smart user experience design and a strong technical foundation. Honestly, anybody can build a beautiful site these days. It's pretty easy to build beautiful things, but does it really work? You know, is it really creating meaningful pathways for engagement and conversion? And is your code base in a good place? Sometimes when we go with sites that come into support, I would say maybe 1 in 100 is a total rebuild. But most often, code bases are fixable. We've actually had the case where a nonprofit or a higher ed or any of our clients come to me and they say, oh, I'm so done with Drupal. I'm so done with WordPress. I've got this budget, we need to rebuild. And I say, wait a minute, let's look under the hood first. Because 99% of the time, your code's actually not a throwaway. And if you're on WordPress, WordPress has backwards compatibility. If you're on Drupal 8, we have backwards compatibility. So you're looking at always a focused fix kind of going forward. Between Drupal versions, we've always been kind of forced to upgrade, and now we're in this nice place that as soon as you get on to 8, you're essentially in a beautiful place because Drupal has committed to backwards compatibility. Which, if you're curious what that is, you know how you update your iPhone or your Mac and you just kind of press a button and then it goes dark and then it comes back? Well, that's the commitment from Drupal 8 to 9. So if you're considering Drupal or WordPress, both are wonderful platforms, and we have another talk coming up on Thursday about CMS comparisons and going through the decision-making process of which one to choose. But really, when we're looking at optimal website health in the perspective of an audit, we're looking at the UX and the tech. So I'm going to unpack each one of those. So going first to the UX audit, it's a fairly comprehensive piece of work. It can be decoupled, and you can just look at the technical audit first. So we're going to break them. There we go. There we go. So we're going to break those we're going to unpack the UX audit first. So first off, when we're looking at taking a look at the landscape, it usually starts with the humans. You know, when people ask me what is the biggest risk to a project, I always say it's content and humans. And in the sweetest way possible, it's because these humans all have perceptions on how the site is supposed to work, what the organization objectives are. So it's really important in doing, and at first just a ground study of, you know, what are the goals for the website? And are they achieving them? What is the big goal for the organization? How is the website supporting that goal? So really getting clear on the purpose, because your website is really a digital communication tool, and it's one tool in your whole toolkit of ways that you communicate. Very important tool, so it's important to actually get clear on what the goals are. It's also important to do stakeholder interviews. So if you're doing this in-house, what you can do is you can come up with a set of questions, and they're meant to be probing questions and discovery questions. So like all good research, you have to be mindful of the questions that you're asking, because the question set can actually lead people in different directions, and you can skew data. And that's why it's so important to also take data from multiple avenues and aggregate the data versus just talking to one set of stakeholders. A really great set of stakeholders to look at is if you have any type of customer service or donor fulfillment or any type of activities that people are going through after they've converted. You know, it's really helpful to talk to stakeholders that are involved with the day-to-day operations versus just management of those departments. The department managers, or depending on the organization size, will have like the goals and the vision, but the boots on the ground are really going to be telling you about the user frustrations or the complicated parts of the overall journey for your You can also do a bunch of workshops where you're kind of working through ideation and kind of figuring out what if they're, you know, sometimes we're going through a new project, we get together and we do a design workshop and we do a business workshop and then we do a technical workshop to kind of extract all those different facets of information. And ultimately what we're going to be doing here is we're requirements gathering. What does the organization want? What does the organization need? How does that support the user journey to convert? Once we get the stakeholders information, we then move on to the user. Now, the user research is something that if you do nothing, that's a mistake. Just do a little bit, or if you can, do a lot. We work with so many different types of clients that would say on the minimum, if you can't do anything else, let's just, you know, talk to a couple of stakeholders, let's do a couple of audience interviews, and if you were in the last session, Kat talked about how to track your users without being creepy. And one of those things that you can do really easily to get data is to put on some of those anonymous tracking. So you can see user sessions. You can see where a mouse pauses. You can see where it hovers. You can see where it clicks. So you can start just even looking at data of how people are currently using your site. And if you wanted to get more in tune with your community, you could end up doing one-on-one user interviews and asking them direct questions of like, more gauged around like, you know, what did you come to the site for? What do you use the site in terms of your decision-making process? Which were the areas that you found easy to work with on the site? You know, how did the site support your journey? Did you find that anything was missing? So it's good to talk to people that have just freshly signed up and been freshly donated or gone through some type of conversion process to understand their needs throughout that journey. You can also do a little simple pop-up survey. We find this to be very effective. There's a little pop-up that you can put on through Hotjar or SurveyMonkey, a lot of those, Crazy Egg, and the question you need is, what did you come here for today? And that's a really powerful question. You can ask them like a bunch of questions, but a lot of times people that are coming to your site, like for example, and Golden Gate National Parks Conservancy is in the room, when we did our work with them, we put up a little pop-up survey, and over 50% of the respondents said, I'm coming here to find out what's happening today in the parks. Well, guess what? I'm not a stakeholder at that. So if you don't listen to the user, you end up missing really, really valuable information. And what's also nice is if you talk to the stakeholders first and then you talk to the users, you can validate some of their craziness, right? They're like, the stakeholder, oh, I want this, and I want this, and I want this. And then you go and you ask them, you're like, hey, would this be of interest to you? Is this? And they're like, I don't even know what that means. You know, or what are you talking about? No, I came for this. This is my pathway. Or, you know, these are the things that I need to support my journey. And I think that it's such a movement right now for the personalization. I mean, you see that everywhere. It's like the constant is personalization, yet at the same time, if you're not listening to them and you're not doing that research, you're just making stuff up. So we're big fans of test early and test often, and the great way to do that is, especially with those key people that are willing to do user interviews with you, they're actually really good test subjects to test navigation changes on. So sometimes people look for different sets of users to test new things, but sometimes it's valuable to take that same user set and test with them and see how much they have can understand more clearly, and they can create some context. Again, bad questions are bad questions. So it's really important to craft good questions when coming up with any type of survey or any type of interview. Yes. It's also important to look at the landscape. What are your competitors doing? You know, what is the industry doing? A SWOT analysis of strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And strengths and weaknesses are within the organization, and opportunities and threats are external. So politics, you know, different market opportunities, you know, all the fires in Northern California, unfortunately, but that was a good momentum for people to take advantage of an opportunity to rally the community and get support. You know, so it's really about coming up with understanding the landscape and then also looking for some design inspiration. And that may or may not come from your competitors. You know, it's really good to kind of, you know, do some, you know, fun Googling around other sites that have created a lot of impact and kind of looking at design trends. And then you look at the current site. This is a little bit what we're going to dig into in the technical audit, but really what we're looking at is we're looking at taking a look at all the content. There's a lot of great tools that can actually export all the content into a CSV, and then you can look at it and check all the elements, but often that disconnects you from the actual site itself. So as painstaking as it is, it's good to go through page by page. And you know, when doing a content audit, it can get quite hairy, because if you have a lot of content that's old, you know, it can become very overwhelming. So sometimes it's helpful to work with other subject matter experts within your team that can take on certain sections of content, and you can create some ownership. In Drupal and WordPress, there was this lovely trend of decentralization of content, so everybody and anybody could create content. And what happened is the branding and the marketing people went, okay, that's cool, let's bring it back in, right? Because often it's like all these different voices are out there. So if you don't already have like a style, like a voice and tone, or you know, choice on how you're going to actually do your content governance and your content strategy, this is a really good opportunity to inventory what you have. Based on the stakeholder feedback and the user feedback, you can kind of say, okay, well, based on user feedback, these types of information that we present in our stories are most valuable, so maybe we should restructure some of our content. And based on the user research, you'll start usually seeing some gaps in your content needs to fulfill whatever portion of your user's journey they're in. Because most of the time when a person comes to your website or they interact with your brand, it's like the traditional at least 7 times before they're going to take action. And when you're looking at doing the persona work on where they belong, and people are asking like, how do you track people in different stages of the funnel? There's really, you know, the awareness. People aren't aware of who you are, so you need to create content that generates awareness. And that type of content shouldn't be about you. It should be about the big market problems, the big opportunities, the challenges that you're, you know, not that you're solving, but the world is going after, the big problems. And then you move into the consideration content, which is now they know you because they found you from this cool article about the problem they're solving, and now they're looking at other content on your site. And then you actually have the decision stage content, which actually is about you and your brand. So it's kind of figuring out what content do you have in each one of those sections. Do you have consideration content? Do you have decision-making content? Is all your content just about you? Because if all your content is just about you, you've got a big gap and a lot of market opportunities, right, with meaningful, thoughtful, engaging, valuable content. Because that's what Google really likes. Google really just likes good content. Okay, so let's unpack the technical audit. But before we go on there, I just wanted to stop and see if anybody had any questions around studying UX or design. Okay, yes?
About mobile optimization. So originally we're focusing on interacting with our phones. Can this help us with making our sites more friendly?
Totally. Yeah, I definitely would say that mobile optimization is something that you have to think about in so many ways. First off, Google will penalize you if you don't have a mobile version of your site. So you will be degraded in the search rankings. And number 2 is that when you're looking at the current site behavior, it's good to understand the user journey and the pathways that they'll go on. And if you do find that over 50% of your users are on mobile, or 75%, or maybe it's only 5%, and then you can prioritize the actual content experience. Because most of the time, a lot of web developers, and this is just a natural source of where it started, was they just took everything and they just stacked it. But that doesn't necessarily mean it's in the right hierarchy and the right strategy in terms of what comes up first. It's really easy to do some of that analytics on a heat map, so you can see where people are using and kind of looking at some of the tracking tools to see what's most effective. But yeah, it's definitely mobile is one of those things that you can't ignore anymore, Okay. So these ones are specifically Drupal modules, because originally when we signed up, it was you had to choose, and then it got all merged and stuff. So we have other WordPressy ones that I can pop in here. We also have Kat in here. She can talk about anything WordPress. So in Drupal specifically, we have the Hacked module. So it's a really easy module that you can just install and you can run, and you can pull up all the different kind of areas of if Drupal core has been modified. That's a big no-no. You never want to modify Drupal core or WordPress core. And it's going to be able to check any modules at any time. It's also going to be able to check contrib modules against Drupal.org and provide a diff file of what has been actually changed. And then you want to clean all that up. Because if you do have a situation where every time you update Drupal core, your site crashes, it means that usually core has been hacked. And that's a very big no-no. So if you do have those problems, definitely talk to your web person. In general, there's also a security review module that you can install. It's written and maintained by a Drupal member of the Drupal community security team, so it's well maintained. And it really looks quickly for malicious fields. So these are just quick wins that you can pop into your site right now, run the modules, run the scans, and they'll come up with a report. There's also a site status report page that you can reach, and it's going to tell you basic things about your site. Like, has core been updated? And you really want to see more green versus the red or the yellow. You'll notice that they will have there's like a little error warning sign. So people often ask me is how often do I need to update my plugins and my modules? And we have a thing where we usually update any WordPress or Drupal site within an hour of the core release. It's a big job, everybody does it, but thanks to friendly hosting partners like Pantheon or Platform Rock, yeah, it's definitely a push of a button versus doing it all manual. Contrib modules are something that if they come with a security update, those should also be done right away. But a lot of times, contrib modules in Drupal, they don't need to be updated every single time. You can usually wait and batch them quarterly or batch them every month and try to save some of that switching costs. Because often it's new functionality or elements that the developer has provided. And sometimes you don't even need that functionality. So to avoid additional updates, we just focus on doing the core ones, the security ones first, and then batch everything else together. Kat, is there anything on the WordPress side of things that would be a good plugin to use for security, or just putting her on the spot right now? For hacking. Okay, we'll include that in the update. But I know that when it comes to just generally with WordPress, just do your updates right away. Don't wait on them. WordPress, there's more propensity for hacks. So it's just really important that you do all your updates right away. It's a very, very, very costly thing to unhack a site. It's way more affordable to maintain proactive security updates. And with tools that are out there right now, it definitely makes it a lot easier to do that, because with the platform as a service model that you have a dev test live, and you can put up, update stuff, test it, and you can actually do most of it as a non-technical person. Like, I'm a non-technical person, even though I'm highly technical, I'm not a developer. And I can do it, which is like, I don't do it, but it is something that you can get training. For a lot of our people, it's like, how do we get you to do stuff yourself? And if they can do their own core updates through Pantheon, then it's a nice click of the button and they can just take care of it. Okay, so we also want to look at things like your theme. So after we've done the core analysis, we've taken on a site, we've kind of looked under the hood, we've ran some basic checks, we then go through and we actually examine elements. And one of the biggest areas of performance issues, of crusty editing experiences, of just overall brokenness is in the theme. So we have to look to see do your templates contain complex PHP? Is the markup semantic? Is there logic that's tied to the theme that maybe should actually be put into a custom module? This is where you look to see if your site's responsive and how it's set up for mobile. It's a really good time to also look at image sizes. Most people just download whatever they've got that's huge, and then they upload it onto their site, and then they have major performance issues. One of the biggest things you can do to your site right now is just go and look at all your images, and boom, you often can change them out for more web-friendly versions, and you'll get an immediate performance boost. You also want to look are your external resources being compressed? Do you have load blocking JavaScript? Do your templates access and use data according to WordPress and Drupal best practices, or are they doing crazy things? And are styles well organized? Now, in order to look at your theme, you are going to have kind of that theming coding eye. It's not usually something that you can look at with the naked eye as kind of a normal human being if you're not a developer. Those people are also normal human beings, but I mean, in the general sense, it's like, that kind of stuff you probably want to get some support on. But in general, there is a couple of performance tools you can use, like for example, the Google Page Speed. If you just search Google Page Speed, you'll find the URL, you can pop in your site, it'll run a diagnostics on your site from a performance standpoint, and it'll give you a grade. So it'll be like 2, means it's really bad, right? Or it's 5, or it's 100, right? And you're really trying to get to 100 for both mobile and desktop, and Google Page Speed actually gives you both. Pingdom has one. I'm sure there's SEO Moz or SEM Rush, they all have them, but Google Page Speed really gives actionable insights that you can take to a developer if you're unclear what the answers are and say, this is what Google Page Speed says, please help me. Checking your SEO. So SEO is so near and dear to our hearts because it is something that you can really build a lot of organic traffic off of. And when it comes to your SEO, it is something that you can often fix on your live site before you rebuild. So you have more cleaner pathways, you have more stuff, especially if you have a current content management system. But you can look at, are you using meta and title tags? Is your site running over HTTPS, which is just making sure you have an SSL certificate? Are you using headings correctly? Do you provide accelerated mobile content? How many people are familiar with AMP, or accelerated mobile pages? Yeah, okay, of course you are. So really it's an essence of like serving up content that's more static in a mobile experience, so maybe rapidly fast. And when it comes to performance on a phone, as soon as you have lagging on your phone, your users are gone. Right? They can't deal, people just can't deal with slow sites, even if it is just their network. So, checking to see if you don't have that, that's a performance boost that you can often do from not only an SEO standpoint, but also from a site performance standpoint. Because Google also likes fast sites, right? If your site takes more than 3 seconds to load, you're losing people. It's plain and simple. I don't know how many folks that we take in through support and we say, let's do an audit. We have like 6 to 10 really low-hanging fruit, and boom, their site speeds up and conversions are up. And it's really powerful when a client's a little like, oh, nervous, I don't know, I'm feeling a little burnt out because I've been through so many web vendors and then I had so much stress, and then you kind of adopt them and you're like, oh, I see why you had so much stress, okay. And then we just say, okay, let's do stuff like we'll start logging the search and finding out what people are searching for so we can optimize your content strategy. Okay, let's go ahead and optimize your images. Okay, let's go ahead and just turn on Ghost SEO and start putting in all the content, because sometimes you don't even have the basics. So it's really nice to be able to actually help those nonprofits and all of other clients move the needle within the first 30 days of your engagement, because you're actually helping people fill out forms faster, convert faster. And even if that's because you've got a big web build coming up, that's even more reason why you should optimize what you have now so you know that what's working. Because there's so much I'm so much in the vein of like, if you're going to build a website, it shouldn't just look pretty, because that's not going to make it work. It's about where is your structured content, how are you treating your SEO, how you're treating your performance, what does accessibility look like, and then really not over-engineering it, because so many people come out and they say, oh, I need all these things, and then you launch and half of your member portal never gets used. I don't know how many people have set up online communities for nobody to use them, and everybody's in Facebook on a group. So it's kind of, you got to meet the user where they are, and when it comes to SEO, you have the ability to be able to even structure content so you can come up to where they are. So how you see those recipes, if you ever search like, oh, I'm looking for an Italian dish for dinner, gluten-free vegan cupcakes or something. In Google now, it comes up with all those results with the picture, and it's all tidy. That's structured data. So if you have events, you can also structure the data on all of your events. If you have articles, you can structure that data so you actually dominate in the search terms because you're coming up to the top because you've given stuff that Google likes. So it's taking a look at, do you have some of this markup already? What do you have to do to change your site? Accessibility is another huge one. How many people are familiar with Lighthouse? Couple? Okay. This is a great tool. Go to Lighthouse, put in your URL, and test your website. It's going to give you 4 main pillars. It's SEO, performance, accessibility, and where is she? Tammy, what's the 4th one? Accessibility, it's content structure, it's performance, accessibility, SEO, and one other. But the point is that when I'm even talking to a client that if they're going through a rebuild or if they're coming into a support relationship, I have a little browser plugin in Chrome, I click the little button and I run a Lighthouse report, and it gives me a sense of how crappy their code is or how wonderful their code base is regarding these pillars. And accessibility and SEO are often the ones that are either like accessibility is right up and they totally get it, but their SEO's in the toilet, or they have their SEO bang on, but then their performance is way out. There's never really one I see that has 400s. So there's lots of room to improve in almost every site, and there are diagnostic tools that are available to give you baseline human stuff you can do, and then you'll probably want to figure out how to work with either your hosting partner, your web partner. There's stuff that you can offload to them. And again, a lot of it is fixable. A lot of people think they have a crazy old site, and maybe you do. Maybe it is time. But oftentimes we do see we can take them in and really fix them up. From an accessibility standpoint, you're looking at things like, can you actually use your keyboard to navigate the site? If you turn off the CSS, can you actually read and learn and get around? Can you use a text browser? How is your color contrast? Do your images contain alt text? Do you have skip navigation and other wayfaring links? So there's lots of different things that you can check just from your own assessments, Lighthouse report, generally working with a developer, but with this being such a huge part of a web experience, it's really important to make sure that you take this, and I feel like I'm talking to people that already know how important this is, but a lot of our corporate clients are like, let's cut that. I'm like, no, it's the same thing. It's way easier to be proactive than get faced with a lawsuit. And custom code. So this is the sticky stuff usually that somebody else has built. And it's really interesting that when I'm looking at, kind of looking at the custom code side of things, this is often where you really need a developer to kind of go through it. If you go into your site and there's no custom modules, that's often a benefit in some ways because there's nothing that's kind of hiding and lurking. But most sites, if they're a little larger, have some type of custom code. So it's kind of identifying, what does that code do? Is it well documented? Is it portable, or do we need to rewrite it? Is it creating too many calls? Is it too complex? Can we simplify it to improve performance? And you want to assess the code quality. So you want to find out, does it actually meet the scripting standards? Does JavaScript validate? You want to look at front-end styles and standards. Do the styles that drive the look and feel, are they well structured? Are they easy to extend? And patching. If changes have been made in place, are there patches that are set up so it's easy to maintain? Or is it just a bunch of crazy code? So when you put in a new updated version of the module or the plugin, the site breaks. So, you know, looking under the hood can get kind of technical in that nature. You also want to read your documentation. I would say 99% of the sites that come into support have zero documentation. So if you don't have any, that's pretty normal. It is great if you can create documentation, and even if it's just on the user level of the users, like how are they supposed to interact with the site? What is the goal they're trying to accomplish? What is the functionality? But really we want to look at project level, like what is documented on the project level? What's documented on the component level? So how clear is a custom modular plugin? And then code level, which is like our classes, functions, variables, and business logic well documented. Performance. So I touched on this a little bit at the beginning, but really performance, again, if your site takes longer than 3 seconds to load, you have a problem. And it's time that you address that. Probably I would say one of the first things to do is just check your site and your site speed. You can look at Google Page Speed, like I mentioned, Pingdom. Is the hosting partner you have reliable? You know, sometimes if you pay $9 for shared hosting, you're gonna get $9 worth of shared hosting. And if your site goes offline all the time and people are unable to complete transactions, you've got a problem. So it might be time to beef up your spend on your hosting company to make sure that you have better availability. You can also do things like you can enable page and block caching. So you can kind of get more fine-tuned on the type of caching rules that you set. And caching really is a tool that allows a picture of all the database queries to be pushed up versus the database being queried over and over again. Because Drupal and WordPress are wonderful, and they can dynamically spin up content and so forth, but that does impact performance. So having a smart caching strategy can actually reduce the amount of issues you have on the performance level. You can enable CSS and JavaScript aggregation, and you can use a CDN. A CDN is a great way to manage your images and your assets and optimize them.
CDN.
It's a great question. A CDN is a content delivery network, and it is essentially a tool that facilitates a more performant pushing out of images and assets. So you may have heard of Cloudflare. Yeah, so Cloudflare is a popular CDN. Fastly is another one. And I believe a lot of the hosting partners have these types of things built into them. And more of like the Pantheon platform Acquia hosting partners than the GoDaddies, right? So you kind of get what you pay for when it comes to hosting. Okay, so this is really the outcome that you're looking for. And this is something that you can even just start on your own if you're not if you're not a developer, that's okay. Because I feel like with the tools that are out there, you can really look at your user experience, you can talk to your stakeholders, you can do the requirements gathering. It's really easy to install Hotjar. I have a blog about it, just how to do it. So you can install it, like Kat said in the last session, there's a free version that can get homepage tracking. Or a marginal fee, you can actually get user data without being creepy, and you can kind of just see where people are going and where people are hovering. That in itself could just be a really awesome, yes?
That version is free for nonprofits.
Oh, and that version's free for nonprofits. There we go. There you go. So that's a bonus. Really love that tool. We find it a lot, yeah. Hotjar. Yeah, you bet. So what you want to do is you want to create a prioritized list. Because now that you've taken an inventory of all your user experience, all your design, like what's working on mobile, what's not, maybe if you found that the mobile content is just stacked and it would be optimal to actually place key content in certain areas based on our understandings, that is a simple task. So it's an easy way to start digesting, because sometimes it can feel overwhelming. You're like, oh my goodness, I have all this stuff to think about. You go, okay, well, let's just do what is kind of low-hanging fruit. Run the page speed test, run the Lighthouse report. You're gonna get stuff that's gonna be easy to fix. And then you're gonna have some stuff you're like, I don't know what this is whatsoever. So that's one of your tasks, is to figure out what that is and to get help on that. The beautiful thing about Drupal and WordPress is it's open source, and there's a very robust community that wants to support and help, whether it's your local WordPress meetup or whether it's your local Drupal meetup or the forums. It's a great way to go and say like, hey, I did a report and I got this answer and I'm not too sure what to do with it. There's a great community out there if you don't already have an agency partner that can help with the other stuff. And you also want to make sure you have, it's really helpful when you are getting kind of this laundry list of things that you want to accomplish on your site, trying to figure out a level of effort, because that also helps prioritize. Like, for example, if you have no, like, for whatever reason, you have no meta tags, you have no descriptions on any of the pages, you know, just maybe doing that, you might think, okay, if I've got 300 pages, it's going to take me 5 minutes per page, then you can start getting some mental math together around the level of effort. And that really helps prioritize and to delegate. So you need kind of a team of people to help manage the website. A lot of people are a team of one. You know, it's very common in our nonprofit world, but there is often subject matter experts that can help you. So if you determine that, you know, all of this content, these certain pieces of content are really attractive, but we have a gap in our content, then we can say, okay, that's another thing on our prioritized list. And we know that we're going to need 10 new blog posts to account for this new strategy we're working on. It's going to take them 8 hours a piece and editing time. And you can start backing out like how long is all these fixes and stuff going to take. And it never hurts sometimes to build out a few creative assets. We find that when we're doing kind of unearthing everything and coming up with it, sometimes it's easier, even just as a normal person again, like me, take a piece of paper and draw on it, and that often helps people understand some of the changes. So when you're creating kind of this prioritized list with estimates and kind of a timeline, you can also sometimes, it's more visually easier for people to digest if you actually create a little mock-up. Or if you're gonna reorganize the sitemap because you decided this content structure is out of date to meet your audience needs, kind of mapping that out, and then mocking up an actual like sitemap, right? And showing the new navigation on mobile and desktop within the context of the current design. So sometimes it's a little tricky if you don't have the design skills to do that, but even on a piece of paper is a great start, you know, and then you can always work with a designer. But often just kind of framing things in a visual storytelling way often helps other people understand the changes that you want to create. And it also helps with user testing. So if you wanted to do some basic like navigation changes, because you realize that's maybe going to make more impact based on your research, is that you can just mock it up and then ask sets of people to say, point to where you would go to find this. or show me how you go to find that. You can actually do navigation testing within certain tools and set up your navigation and allow people to click through if you wanted to get that sophisticated. But sometimes you can just show it on a piece of paper. There's a really great book called Rocket Science Made Easy. And it's about UX testing. And it's like guerrilla research. It's like how to get, they have the napkin test, and there's lots of really like low cost, no cost ways of doing user research. So that's a really great book from a really long time ago. So I hope they put out a new one because it's one of my first books that I've ever read. Okay, and there we go. So any questions? And I do have kind of a checklist of all the things that you can check. It's really boring to read all that on a slide. So while I said a lot of these things, what I'm going to do is I'm going to publish this video on YouTube, which will give me captions. And then I'll also be able to share if you want a copy of our website health checklist that goes through all of these things. Tanya just passed around a piece of paper. It's definitely not for anything other than just sharing resources. I will put this up on SlideShare and then tweet out the actual URL so you don't have to, but if you want me to just email you a direct copy, then you can just email me back with questions. Because I'm definitely in the mindset of, I really like helping people. That's the #1 reason I do my job. So I'm happy to help you regardless if we ever work together. Like I really don't care. I want you to come to me and say, hey, I'm thinking about doing this. What do you think? And I can just yes, no, help you right there because I've been doing this for so long and I've worked with so many clients that I'm up for any challenge. I'm like, bring the hard stuff to me. So, yes.
Can you give your recommendations for those of us who are a team of one?
Okay, great. Yeah. So the question is like, as a powerful team of one, what can I do that's the low-hanging fruit or the easiest stuff to kind of move forward on first? And I would definitely say that Hotjar is a great tool because it gives you real data, and it's often, again, those humans, those lovely humans, it helps validate whatever they're saying, or you can kind of go back with data. So I think that's a great tool. I would also say that setting up your site search console in Google Analytics is really powerful. I learned from Kat actually over the course of her research is that when people use your site search, they're very intentional, which means they're looking for something. So users that use your site search are 200 times plus, depending on what study you look at, more likely to convert. So if you do anything, I would say turn on in Google Analytics your site search log, if you have a site search, and then start seeing what people are actually searching for. And that's a really good way to send flags up to Marcom to say, hey, we need articles about this specific thing because we've gotten 20 searches on it this month and we have no articles to show for it. So that's a really low hanging fruit you can do. Another one is setting up, like doing a performance check, and those images, like content managers power, and my goodness, it's scary because they've uploaded crazy sizes images that are like 17 times bigger than they need to be. So going through and compressing images is another way to kind of get a quick win. Another one is that sometimes if you're on a crazy old hosting provider, just moving to a new hosting provider provides a lot of the benefits out of the box. Like almost like Acquia, Pantheon, and Platform, they all have performance tools built in. So instead of trying to rewrite all of your theme or do a bunch of crazy updates, just simply putting it on one of those platforms as a service where they have those tools, they have a CDN, it kind of just goes, whoop. We moved one of our clients and they had like a 3,000% increase in performance just by moving them to the hosting provider. The hosting company loved that stat, right? But it was just crazy how crappy their shared hosting was. So it was always going down, and it was just like having the relief of the stakeholder knowing that their site's no longer going to crash because they've paid a little more in hosting, now gives them the headspace to actually move forward. I would say those are the major. Any other, Kat, that you would say that's low-hanging fruit from like a power of one?
No, I think those are the big ones.
Yeah.
In terms of just starting.
Yeah, and I mean, a lot of people, Google Analytics is a very scary place for a lot of people. It's a little overwhelming and daunting to actually log in and start manipulating data. But adding the site search and also looking at adding the Google search, they just changed it from the webmaster tools.
Search console.
Yeah, but there was another one I remember you mentioned. No, it was just for logging because, you know, as a Google user, your data is obscured.
That's console.
That's console. Okay, so same. Glad I have cat. So, yeah, those are kind of the low-hanging fruits.
There are some other tools not in this discussion that I actually did a workshop 2 weeks ago, and I'm excited to start using, that will do things like crawl through all the CSS on your site and identify how those files are not being used. So another thing you can do from a really low-hanging fruit perspective to help the performance and help make things easier to maintain is to, you know, it's easy to delete stuff. It's harder to create stuff. So one option is to go through and start to clean out things that don't need to be there. Reduce the file weight and start to really understand what you have. And when you have limited time and you're a team of one, that's a great way to kind of start the process of cleanup without being overwhelmed with the planning piece of it. So a lot of the times you'll find sites are built with frameworks or tools, Bootstrap, Foundation, some of these different things. And if they're not set up correctly, they're actually loading a ton of functionality and not even using. So starting to eliminate that kind of weight from your site is another nice thing to start.
Yeah, and I'll include a link to that tool that Kat has.
I gotta grab it out of my bag.
What's the tool called? Do you remember?
Give me 1 second. I have it.
Okay, and we'll include it in the little summary and include that there because I think that's very helpful. Because it's one of those things where you could spend a lot of time fixing stuff and it's really what's the highest priority in terms of your time. And there is another thing that we find with some people that come in and they didn't know they had like 6 other tracking tools that weren't even, they were just sitting there. And when you do your Google page speed test, you'll be able to see what is taking up most of the performance. You'll be able to see right there from the naked eye, oh, there's a bunch of tracking stuff. I'm not tracking anything. So what is this stuff on my site? So you can start kind of looking at and doing some deductions that way too. Yeah.
Do you have size recommendations for images? Not pixel based, but just overall.
Do I have size for images? And I think I have to ask Kat on that one again, because I'm not close enough to actually what the size of the image should be as the boss.
So it's really, I mean, it really depends on your layout. I mean, generally speaking, the answer is as small as possible, right? And there are a lot of tricks to get there. I would say, and if you're using like WordPress or any of your platform, there are responsive image techniques that will be able to load the smallest version of the image for the resolution that the person is at, like whatever version of it is that they need. So if you look at some responsive image techniques, there are ways to do that as well, so that you can, you know, we talk about the maximum file size, but the reality is you don't want to load the maximum file size and minimum screen resolution, right? So there are standards now that have evolved in terms of supporting responsive imagery to selectively load a different version of the file. That said, Retina has made everything more difficult. With regards to JPEGs, though, the compression, my experience has been, unless you're serving giant full screen images, which is always going to hurt your performance, it doesn't really matter how heavily you optimize your imagery, you can bring it down to, I never upload anything, I don't think that's bigger than 2,000 pixels. But in terms of file weight, I don't have a hard and fast diagram. Our objective is to try to hit that 3-second or less load time on a 3G network. Whatever that looks like.
Have to have them on there, but if you like what you recommend.
I think that's a very kind of a common thing, and I'm curious if any of the caching strategies.
What do you do with caching? So,
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
That's where I start.
Yeah. What does your page caching strategy look like? Are you already caching those pages? Can you cache those pages? That's where I would start.
Yeah, and caching is kind of like, again, taking that image and putting it up there and then allowing people to still interact with it.
Does that impacts people like returning visitors, but if it's someone's first time to your site, it would still take all that time to load
Usually it's the first time, yeah. But once the page has been loaded, it usually caches.
Actually, so it's not going to be on a per user basis. It's going to be a system.
Yeah, yeah.
So once the pages are generated in the cache on the first visitor, the very first visitor that comes will have a silver screen. But once that happens, everybody else is going to get the static version.
Yeah. Great. I think that's up for time. We have time for one quick question, or we can continue on. Awesome. Well, thanks again, everybody, for coming today. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your sessions at NTC. We are doing a CMS selection session, and of course, we're going to have our booth, so you're welcome to stop by and say hi. Again, my name's Anne, CEO and founder of Canopy Studios, and thank you so much for coming today.